Okay, we're now on problem number 5. Find the value of each of the following expressions. Remember that powers are figured out before multiplications. So let's take a look at our first problem. Here we have 5 times negative 3 squared. Now notice that the negative 3 is being squared, and we're going to cover that more further along when we deal with exponents, but we need to be careful to apply the exponent properly here, particularly to this negative. And it would be a lot different if we wrote it this way, negative 3 squared, where we're simply squaring the 3 and then making it negative. In this case, we're actually saying negative 3 is being squared. So if we were to rewrite that or just to expand it, we would say that would be 5 times negative 3 times negative 3. Now we know negative 3 times negative 3 would yield positive 9, and positive 9 times 5 would be 45. So again, be careful. And as they say, you have to do your order of operations properly. You have to figure out that powers are to be computed. Now it's really just a long multiplication here. We just want to make sure we don't multiply 5 times negative 3 and get negative 15 and then square that, because that would have been a completely different answer, and it's not the answer to this problem. Now let's take a look at negative 3 times 5 squared. So let's break this out. I would feel more comfortable putting that negative 3 inside of this parenthesis so we can see it better and we can know that it's negative. But this is just simply 5 times 5, right? All right, so what do we have? Well, we have, and we're squaring here. Now, if we were to do this, then we really have already released, in a certain sense, our duty to square, to factor, or to figure out what the exponent is. Now we can do this in our mind. We can just go ahead and multiply, 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 multiply. But in a sense, that's what we're doing over here. At least we're laying it out in a way that we're addressing the exponent first, and we're doing that by simplifying this expression. I could have just said 5 times 5, 5 squared, and I could have just said, well, that's equal to what? Negative 3 times 25, right? So I would have squared, and the answer there would have been negative 75. That's negative 3 times 25. Now, what do I have here? Well, I basically have the same thing. It's going to be negative 75. Okay, so you can see it from different ways, and as you go in, you're gonna have more complex exponents. I see a negative 3 cubed and a 3 to the 4th power. So again, you have to make sure you're multiplying enough, and sometimes it's just easier to break the expression out like this so you can just do your multiplication and keep track of what you're multiplying. Okay. Let's take a look at number 6. Find the value of each of these expressions. Now here we have to be careful with order of operations again. The first one, quite simply, 2 minus 3 times 4, and it's almost as if we're just reviewing what we learned in, I believe it was in chapter 1. We know that we have to multiply here first. We don't subtract before we multiply. So that would be 2 minus 12, and then of course 2 minus 12 is going to be a negative 10. And we've discussed that quite a bit throughout this chapter, and subtracting and a larger number from a smaller number. Okay, but if we look further, you're going to be challenged to find these values. Be careful with your exponents. Do those first. So we're not going to do all these problems. I think you can all handle that, and if you have any questions, they can certainly be brought to class. Now we have in number 7, find the values of the following expressions given that x is equal to negative 7 and y is equal to negative 3. Again, we're told to put these values into these expressions. Now, in some of these cases, you have to be very careful, and I'm going to jump directly to B. And B would look like, we'll just stay up here, and we have 4x minus y. 4x minus y. Now, we've got to be careful. We're told that x is going to be negative 7, right? If x is negative 7 and y is going to be negative 3. Okay, now I have a little bit of concern with the minus sign here and this negative 3, and we're going to go over that. Let's just put in the x value first. So we're going to say 4 times. And notice I put in these parentheses, and I highly recommend that you use these parentheses because we can easily see 4 times negative 7 here. But what happens over here is we write in minus. We may give ourselves the false impression that we've already put the negative for the 3, which we haven't. We're subtracting negative 3. In this case, we would want to write it like this. Now, I know that the x and the y do not have these parentheses, but you need to be very careful here because you're subtracting a negative, which is much different than from subtracting the positive. If this would have been positive 3, it would have just been minus 3. So we'll see that we can now further find the value calculating 4 times 7 is negative 28, right? Then we have to jump over and say, well, this is minus negative. We know we can turn that into plus by going with the opposite. The opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. So negative 28 plus 3 would be negative 25. Why? Because we could say that negative 28, negative 28 is like writing negative 25 plus what? Negative 3, right? Negative 25 plus negative 3 is negative 28 plus 3. You see how we change this? And what does this give us? That wonderful opportunity to cancel these out, offset them, and we're left with the negative 25. So once again, when you see a y value, it's okay to take these and put these little parentheses around them, and that way you're able to properly place them into the expressions that you're being given. So I see it happening on problem letter E as well, and also in F. In fact, when we're looking at E, we should probably do that. Let's go over here. I'm sorry, I'm putting an arrow there. I don't need that. Let's put E over here. We have x squared minus y squared. And again, we're going to use these same values. So how would I write that? Well, remember, just put your parentheses, and a much bigger parentheses would be helpful here, right? Let's try this again. Negative 7 squared minus parentheses negative 3 squared. Okay, so now we're squaring the actual number. In this case, it's a negative number, which means when we square it, it'll yield a positive number. So what would that look like? Well, negative 7 squared is negative 7 times negative 7, and that would be positive 49. And now we're subtracting negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And so our answer here would be 40. Okay, 49 minus 9. So just be very, very careful with that. Okay.